The champagne flowed like liquid gold in the Crystal Hall ballroom. Designer gowns swept across Italian marble floors, while diamond jewelry caught the light from chandeliers that cost more than most people's houses. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a display of power, wealth, and the kind of exclusive society that protected its own. Marcus Reed stood at the entrance in his clean-pressed navy suit. At 38, he had the kind of quiet presence that could either command a room or disappear into its corners. Today, he knew exactly which role he was expected to play. The invitation in his hand bore the gold-embossed names: Victoria Ashford and Jonathan Sterling, 3. He had driven for hours through thunderstorms to be here. The security guard's hand shot up before Marcus reached the door. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your invitation." His tone was polite but firm, the kind of politeness that barely masked suspicion. Marcus noticed how the same guard had waved through the last 15 guests without asking for anything. He handed over the invitation silently, watching the man examine it like a detective scrutinizing evidence at a crime scene. "This seems legitimate," the guard finally muttered, as if surprised by his own conclusion. Marcus stepped inside and immediately felt the shift. Conversations didn't stop completely, but they stuttered. Eyes found him, assessed him, then looked away too quickly. The ballroom was filled with 400 guests, and somehow Marcus felt like the only person visible. He moved toward the main seating area, where elegantly dressed tables awaited the ceremony. A woman in a silver gown saw him approaching and quickly placed her purse on the empty chair beside her. "Oh, I'm sorry, this seat is taken," she said, though no name card marked it as reserved. Marcus nodded and moved to another table. The same performance repeated itself, each rejection wrapped in a different excuse. Finally, he found an empty chair near the kitchen doors, where waiters rushed past with trays of hors d'oeuvres. No one complained about his presence here. He was far enough from the important guests to be safely ignored. Marcus sat down and watched the beautiful machinery of exclusion work its magic around him. He had seen this dance before, in different ballrooms, different cities, different faces wearing the same expression. A waiter passed him 6 times without offering champagne. When Marcus finally raised his hand, the young man startled as if Marcus had appeared out of thin air. "Oh, sorry, sir. I'll check if we have any more available." He vanished into the crowd and didn't return. Marcus checked his watch and made a mental note. 17 minutes of systematic exclusion. The pattern was holding. Victoria Ashford appeared at the far end of the ballroom in a dress that probably cost more than a year of college tuition. She moved through the crowd like royalty, accepting congratulations and air kisses from guests who treated her like a princess. Her father, Senator Richard Ashford, stood beside her with the confident smile of a man who had spent 30 years convincing people to trust him. His wife Eleanor completed the perfect political family portrait. Then Victoria's eyes swept across the room and landed on Marcus. Her smile froze. For 3 full seconds, she stood completely still, her face draining of color despite the professional makeup. Marcus watched her whisper something urgent to her bridesmaid, then turn and walk quickly in the opposite direction. He recognized the panic in her movements. She wasn't just avoiding him, she was running. Eleanor Ashford noticed her daughter's reaction and followed her gaze to Marcus. Her expression shifted from confusion to something harder. She leaned toward her husband and whispered behind her champagne glass. The senator's eyes found Marcus next, and Marcus saw the calculation happen in real time. Who is he? Why is he here? How do we remove him? Marcus pulled out his phone and typed a message. "I'm in position. The subject recognized me immediately. The response came within seconds. Perfect. Document everything. We move on Monday. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and settled in to watch the performance continue. The ceremony began with all the grandeur money could buy. A string quartet played classical arrangements while guests took their seats. Marcus remained in his corner, watching Victoria avoid looking in his direction even once. Jonathan Sterling III, the groom, stood at the altar looking like he had stepped out of a catalog for generational wealth. Square jaw, perfect teeth, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. As the minister began the traditional words, Marcus noticed Eleanor Ashford speaking urgently to a man in a dark suit. Security, probably private. The man nodded and began making his way toward Marcus, weaving through the seated guests. Marcus didn't move. He simply waited, his hands folded calmly in his lap. "Sir," the security officer said quietly, leaning down, "I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. There's been a question about your invitation." Marcus looked up at him with patient eyes. "My invitation is legitimate. Would you like to see it again?" The security officer hesitated. Something about Marcus's complete lack of fear made him uncertain. "Mrs. Ashford would like to speak with you privately." "I'm sure she would," Marcus replied softly. "But I'm here for the ceremony. I'll move when it's over." The security officer straightened, clearly unprepared for quiet resistance. He retreated to Eleanor Ashford and whispered in her ear. Marcus watched her face tighten with frustration. The ceremony continued, but the Ashford family's attention was split between the altar and the man who refused to leave. After the vows were exchanged and the couple kissed to polite applause, the reception began with dinner service. Marcus's table, tucked away near the service entrance, remained conspicuously empty except for him. No one sat down. Waiters served the other tables first, second, and third. By the time a plate finally arrived in front of Marcus, the food was barely warm. He ate slowly, documenting the timing of each small indignity. Senator Ashford made his way across the ballroom with the determination of a man used to controlling rooms. He stopped at Marcus's table, his public smile firmly in place. "I don't believe we've been introduced. Richard Ashford." He extended his hand. Marcus stood and shook it firmly. Marcus Reed. He watched recognition flicker across the senator's face. The name meant something, but the senator couldn't quite place it. "Are you a friend of the groom's family?" the senator asked, his tone carefully neutral. "No, sir. I'm here because of Victoria." The senator's smile tightened. "I see. And how exactly do you know my daughter?" Marcus met his eyes steadily. "We have shared history, important history, that I think deserves acknowledgement." Eleanor Ashford arrived like a storm system, her elegant composure barely masking her fury. "Richard, we need to handle this situation immediately. This man is disrupting Victoria's special day." Marcus remained perfectly still. Mrs. Ashford had been sitting quietly in the corner. "The only disruption has been the systematic effort to ignore my presence or remove me from the celebration." "You don't belong here," Eleanor said, dropping all pretense of politeness. Her voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who had spent a lifetime determining who belonged where. "This is a private family celebration, and I don't know who you are or how you obtained that invitation, but I want you to leave now." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He opened his photo gallery and turned the screen toward them. The image showed Victoria, 7 years younger, standing beside Marcus at a university protest. She held a sign reading, "Justice for All." Marcus stood beside her, wearing a Howard University law sweatshirt, his arm around her shoulders in the easy familiarity of close friends. Eleanor's face went pale. Richard leaned in to look closer at the photo, then at Marcus, then back at the photo. "When was this taken?" the senator asked quietly. 7 years ago, Marcus replied. "Your daughter and I were quite close during our time at Howard. We worked together on civil rights advocacy, spent countless hours organizing, planning, dreaming about how we'd change the world together." Victoria appeared suddenly at her father's elbow, her wedding dress rustling with the speed of her approach. "Daddy, please, can we handle this privately?" Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Marcus looked at her directly for the first time since arriving. "Hello, Victoria. Congratulations on your marriage. You look beautiful." His tone was gentle, without accusation, which somehow made it worse. "Marcus, I can explain," Victoria started, but her voice faltered. "How do you explain erasing someone from your history? How do you justify pretending that 3 years of friendship, partnership, and promises never existed?" Marcus waited, giving her space to try. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Eleanor recovered first, her protective instincts overriding her shock. "I don't care what relationship you had in college, that was years ago. My daughter has moved on with her life, and you need to respect that. This is her wedding day, and you're making her uncomfortable." Marcus nodded slowly. "You're right that she's moved on. The question is, has she moved forward or just moved away from the person she used to be?" Senator Ashford's political instincts kicked in. "Mr. Reed, why don't we step outside and discuss this like adults? I'm sure we can reach an understanding." The offer was smooth, practiced, the voice of a man who had negotiated countless uncomfortable situations into silence. Marcus checked his watch. "Actually, Senator, I think the moment for private conversations has passed. I'm not here to cause a scene. I'm here to bear witness." "Witness to what?" Eleanor demanded. Marcus gestured subtly to the ballroom around them. "To the choices your daughter has made, to the person she's become, to the distance between the young woman who fought for justice and the bride who can't acknowledge the existence of her former best friend because of the color of his skin." The words hung in the air like an indictment. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but whether from shame or frustration was impossible to tell. "That's not fair, Marcus. You don't understand the pressures, the expectations, my father's career, our family's position, the sacrifices required." Marcus's expression remained neutral. "I understand perfectly. I understand that you were invited to speak at a civil rights symposium last year and declined. I understand that you left the public defender's office to work at your father's campaign headquarters. I understand that your wedding has 400 guests and not a single person of color except the serving staff." The observation hit like a physical blow. Eleanor's eyes darted around the ballroom, confirming what she had never bothered to notice. Richard's jaw tightened. Victoria covered her face with her hands. Jonathan Sterling III appeared, finally registering that something was wrong. "Victoria, baby, what's going on?" "Jonathan, this is Marcus Reed," Victoria said through her tears. "He's someone I knew in college. The reduction of their friendship to someone I knew was perhaps the cruelest cut of all." Marcus smiled sadly. Someone she knew. Someone who believed in her. Someone who thought she would become the lawyer who defended the defenseless instead of the socialite who hosts fundraisers for politicians who campaign on law and order. Jonathan's confusion gave way to defensive anger. "Okay, buddy, I don't know what your problem is, but you need to leave my wife alone." Marcus turned to the groom. Your wife and I spent 3 years fighting together for criminal justice reform. We were arrested together at a protest in Baltimore. We spent a night in jail together, planning how we'd use our law degrees to change the system. Did she mention any of that when she told you her college stories?" Jonathan looked at Victoria, who couldn't meet his eyes. "Victoria," the groom's voice carried genuine confusion. Marcus continued, his voice still calm but relentless. "Did she tell you about the scholarship fund we started for at-risk youth, or the legal clinic we volunteered at every Saturday? Did she mention that she was offered a position at the ACLU and turned it down?" "That's enough," Senator Ashford said sharply. "Mr. Reed, you've made your point. My daughter's past is her own business, and her choices are not subject to your judgment." Marcus finally showed a flicker of emotion. "You're absolutely right, Senator. Her choices are her own, just as it was her choice to stop returning my calls when you announced your Senate campaign. Her choice to miss my father's funeral because it conflicted with a campaign event. Her choice to become someone I don't recognize." Victoria's tears were flowing freely now, her careful makeup running in dark streaks. "Marcus, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to balance everything. The expectations, the image, the requirements of being a senator's daughter. I thought I could do more good working within the system, supporting my father's initiatives." Her voice broke. "I thought I was making the right choices." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "That's the tragedy, Victoria. You weren't making choices. You were accepting the path of least resistance. And somewhere along the way, you convinced yourself that comfort and influence were the same as courage and impact." He paused. "I'm not here for revenge or to ruin your wedding. I'm here because I needed to see with my own eyes if the Victoria I knew was completely gone, or if there was any chance she might remember who she wanted to be." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice icy. "How dare you come here and lecture my daughter about her choices? You know nothing about the sacrifices required to maintain a position of real influence. My husband has passed legislation that has helped thousands of people. Victoria's support has been crucial to his success. That matters more than your romantic notions about street protests and public defender offices." Marcus turned to Eleanor with the first hint of steel in his voice. "Does it? Let me tell you what Senator Ashford's tough-on-crime legislation has accomplished. Mandatory minimums that have destroyed families, 3 strikes laws that have filled prisons with nonviolent offenders, funding cuts to public defenders that have created a 2-tier justice system where wealth determines freedom." He paused. Victoria knew all of this. She used to fight against it. Now she hosts fundraisers to support it. The senator's face darkened. "My record on criminal justice is a matter of public record and debate. This is neither the time nor the place for political grandstanding. If you have issues with my policies, there are appropriate channels for that discussion." Marcus nodded. "You're right, and I've used those channels. I've testified before committees. I've submitted policy briefs. I've organized community meetings. All while watching your daughter transform from an ally into someone who crosses the street to avoid acknowledging my existence." Jonathan finally found his voice. "Victoria, is all of this true? Were you really involved in all that activism stuff?" The dismissive way he said activism stuff told Marcus everything he needed to know about Victoria's new world. Victoria wiped her eyes. "Yes, it's true. Marcus and I were very close. We shared the same values, the same dreams. But, Jonathan, people grow. Priorities change. I found different ways to make an impact." "Different ways," Marcus repeated softly. "Like erasing your past, like building a life that requires you to pretend that 3 years of your most authentic self never existed. Like surrounding yourself with people who have never had to question their privilege or fight for their dignity. He looked around the ballroom. Like creating a celebration where the only black faces are carrying trays. The accusation hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Guests at nearby tables had stopped pretending not to listen. The beautiful machinery of the wedding ground to an uncomfortable halt. Victoria's carefully constructed perfect day was crumbling, and everyone could see it happening in real time. Eleanor moved closer to her daughter protectively. You have no right to judge her. Victoria has built a beautiful life. She's happy. She's successful. She doesn't need your approval or your outdated expectations. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and allowed himself a small smile. You're right, Mrs. Ashford. Victoria doesn't need my approval. But she might be interested in something else. He turned back to Victoria. I'm not here to destroy your wedding or humiliate you publicly. I'm here to make you an offer. One last chance to remember who you used to be. Victoria looked up, confusion and hope mixed on her tear-stained face. What kind of offer? Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather folder. I'm the director of the Civil Rights Legal Initiative, a nonprofit that provides free legal representation to people who can't afford lawyers. We just received a major grant to expand our operations. I'm here to offer you a position as our lead attorney. The shock on every face was absolute. Eleanor recovered first. That's ridiculous. Victoria has a position at Sterling Ashford Associates, making $300,000 a year. Why would she throw that away for some nonprofit job? Marcus kept his eyes on Victoria. Because Sterling Ashford Associates represents corporations fighting employment discrimination suits. Because she spends her days helping companies avoid accountability for the exact injustices we used to fight against. Because every brief she files makes her a little more complicit in the system we swore to change.